Hey guys, welcome back to another episode of the Mind Muscle Connection podcast. Today I have a guest episode, and Bryan Boorstein is back on the podcast. If you've been listening to this podcast for a while, Brian's been on multiple times. He is on the Eat Train Prosper podcast with Aaron Straker. He does programming at Paragon, and he was my coach for a little bit as well too. And he has years of experience in the fitness industry through CrossFit and everything like that. And so it's always fun to have Brian on. He's definitely somebody that when I have him on, have some topics that we want to discuss, but it's usually just a free flowing conversation. And so we ended up discussing things like caffeine habits and individual tolerance, what that looks like. We talk about Brian's bro split and why he's going to a bro split, what his setup looks like, the exercises he's doing. We also talk about why he's choosing certain exercises for muscle groups. We also discuss what his cardio looks like during this bro split. He also recently went on TRT, so we discussed that and some things that he's noticing and everything like that. And then we actually ended up discussing, we talked about glucose as well too, right? So he was taking his glucose levels to just see where they were at. So we ended up having a long conversation around that as well too. So super interesting to hear us discuss that and some individual differences between that. Again, I think you guys will really enjoy this episode, and Brian's just super fun to chat with, and we definitely nerded out on a lot of things here. So enjoy the episode. First though, before we dive in, just a few ways you can help support the podcast. So first, I have my one-on-one coaching. So if you are interested in coaching, you can check out more in the link there in the show notes, and the link is there to check out coaching. Also, if you like this episode or this podcast in general and you haven't yet, give me a follow on Instagram, Jeff HOEHN_. That's where I'm most active on social media. And if you have any questions on this podcast, I can answer them as well too. And then lastly, if you found this podcast to be helpful in any way in the past, or if you listen to this and you find this to be helpful, if you could leave a rating and review, and that will help more people find the podcast. So that's it. Hope you guys enjoy this episode. Talk to you soon. Brian, welcome back to the pod, man. I think it's been a couple months since we had you on. We were just talking off air about our caffeine. You asked me if I was someone that, if this is, it's 11 o'clock here. You asked me if this was my last cup, and I told you that I tend to go a little bit later. I borderline abuse caffeine, I've realized. And so we were talking about that. I can have it up until 2 and 3 and it doesn't impact my sleep. Whereas you were saying you got to be done at 6:30 in the morning.
Yeah, pretty much just one dose between like 6 and 7 a.m. I'll consume close to 300 milligrams, and then that's pretty much it for the day. I actually find that once I work out, which is usually around 11 or 12, that sort of powers me through the rest of the day. Like it totally changes the way my brain perceives the world and gives me like this kind of second boost of energy. So I mostly just use the caffeine to get through like the work heavy earlier portion of my day, and then the workout takes me through the rest of it.
Yeah, no, that makes sense. I would definitely, if I feel like if I worked out earlier in the day, I don't know, caffeine after a workout, I don't know, I feel like it doesn't really do as much then, and that could just be like you said. I don't know. It's like you just have that natural energy after working out to
Mhm.
where you feel like you don't need it. Plus, probably not the greatest from a recovery standpoint to down a bunch of caffeine and stuff like that after a workout as well too.
Yeah, I think from the workout you get an up regulation of all the catecholamines. And I think that is similar to the effect that you actually get from caffeine, which has similar impact on the same catecholamines.
And you were bringing it up, and with like how late I go with it, and we were talking, I'm like, my resting heart rate stays in the high 40s. Yeah, I have some days where it gets into the 50s. I can tell you when that typically is. It's usually on the weekends when I have a glass of wine or I'm staying up a little bit later. That's when I see it. Usually on the weekends come up a
Mhm.
little bit higher. But other than that, dude, it's like it stays in the high 40s. And so I'm just like, I don't have trouble falling asleep. I get good deep sleep. So I'm like, I just have been like, I'm just gonna enjoy it. And so I keep doing it.
Yep, whatever works for you.
And you said for you, like you've done it, you've done that in the past, and you've noticed that like you just stay up and stay.
Yeah, I just can't like down regulate as easily to get ready for sleep. So I might just be a slow metabolizer of caffeine and you might just be a fast one.
With you being a slow, is that going to change how it impacts you when you take it too, right? Like it's maybe not, you won't get as many of effects right away from it, you think, or is that kind of how that works when you're slow?
I haven't noticed that. I think it's more about the way at which
You
it
clear
leaves
it.
your system. Yeah.
You clear it out, yeah. They say the half-life of caffeine can stay up, for some people can stay up to 20, like up to 24 hours. And there's certain things like, obviously we're not on this, but like birth control can also really slow that process down as well too.
Yeah.
And some people, I think people do forget that there.
I think
Go ahead.
Sorry, even for most people, I believe the range is like 4 to 6 for the half-life, which means that 8 to 12, you're still at a quarter life. So if you're consuming that caffeine at noon and you're trying to go to bed 10 hours later, then you're essentially right in the quarter life window, which means you definitely have not cleared it just as a normal person that clears it like the normal rate.
Which begs the question, if I was like you and I stopped at 6:30, could I get even better sleep and my recovery be even better. I'm sure that's probably the case because since we've had Colby, like I definitely have noticed recovery is just a little bit lower now. For example, last night I had a freaking train at, it was like 7 p.m. and I definitely know that's a big reason why recovery feels and just performance feels a little bit lower. I freaking hate training late at night like that. That it sucks.
It's the worst.
It's like sometimes you just have to do it though.
Dude, I don't think I've trained after 1 or 2 p.m. in cardio or weights for years at this point. I think 1 or 2 p.m. is almost like my hard cutoff where if I haven't trained by then, I'm just taking the day off.
You would just take it off then at that point, essentially.
Yeah, I don't know. I think it's more psychological than anything, but I have this sense in my brain that latter part of the day is for winding down and relaxing and
It
doing
is.
like more sedentary based activities. So like I'll go for a walk in the evening or something like that, but nothing that gets my heart rate elevated or I feel like is hard work.
Yeah, no, I agree, dude. That definitely now since I'm more in tune with like circadian rhythm stuff, and that again, one, I feel like my performance is just not as good later at night. Everything just drags more. It's like last night, for example, like I lost a rep or two from the previous week on a few things, but man, intensity. Not only is it harder, I feel like to get to that higher intensity, but it impacts my like ability to down regulate. I feel like later I'm just more wired. I feel like into the day, later into the night when I have to train that late. And so with cardio, it's same for me now. It's like if I can't get my cardio session in and it's like a higher intensity cardio day, I'm just doing like zone two that night. I'm not doing a high intensity because I know that one,
Yeah.
I'm not going to get the performance I want and it's probably going to impact sleep.
Yep, I think that's right. That makes sense.
Cool, man. What's been going on with you? How's training going on your?
Yeah, so I can't remember if this was on your podcast. Was it with Jordan the last time we were on here?
Yeah, we did speak with
Yeah.
Jordan last time.
I feel like I was musing on the idea of starting a bro split, and I ended up doing it. So starting in maybe it wasn't on this podcast. I can't remember. But either way, always around this time of year when it starts getting cold and I'm doing less cardio, my brain always wants to go to a bro split because it's fun, it's nostalgic. It's just a complete change in protocol where now lifting becomes the dominant portion of my fitness journey for just a few months until it warms up again. And so I always like to do this. I didn't do it last year, but I did the year before, and I think I did the year before that too. And so I've just had this nostalgic drive to go back to it. And so now I'm in week 4 of my bro split. And it's been awesome. I just love it so much as on a short-term basis. I think there's a lot of positives, especially for me, but even on a more global scale for other people, I think I can make an argument for why it wouldn't be quite as suboptimal as maybe the fitness industry would have you believe at this point. But anyway, yeah, it's been fun. And so I've been doing that and that's been great.
What's the setup kind of look like for you?
Yeah, so this is I think where it gets fun is that the first thing to note is that my legs are not something that I care to prioritize. I'm happy to just maintain and work more on like strength than hypertrophy for my legs. And so I'm willing to secede them to once a week frequency. And so one of the days is a quad day and one of the days is a hamstring day. But the cool setup with the upper body is that even though I'm solely focusing on one muscle group, there's essentially at least 2 and even sometimes 3 sessions across the week where I'm getting auxiliary work for other parts of the upper body. On the first day, I have chest, where I just basically do chest. Tuesday is back and lats. And so on both those first 2 days, you're getting some chest, you're getting some triceps and some shoulders, some front delts with the chest day. You're getting some rear delts and some biceps with the back day. So you've in a way covered the whole upper body minus the lateral delts by this point. And then I have the quad day. And then shoulder day is after that. And so on shoulder day, obviously I get my lateral delts in, but I also do some incline pressing. So I get a little bit of upper chest in there. And I do some cable Y raises. So I get a little bit of rear delts in there. So that's a second time for rear delts as well. And then the next day is arms. And on arm day, I have a vertical pull. So I do chin ups. And I also have decline push-ups with a narrow grip. So it's like a tricep push-up, but obviously there's like some chest, some shoulders in there as well. And then obviously arms, biceps, triceps. And then the next day is hamstrings. And then I'll usually take a day off and start back over again. So 6 out of 7 days. So it's been super fun that way. And then the other real driving factor for me is that I'm on this crusade to keep all of my lifting sessions under 40 minutes because back when I was doing the Max OT program, where I romanticized super hard because I feel like I got my best results ever training this way. Similar to setup to the way I'm training right now, by the way. But during that time, I really loved that Max OT required sessions to be under 40 minutes. Like the idea was 30 to 40-minute sessions. And I felt like I could stay so focused and provide such an intense experience. And I miss that kind of time restricted way of lifting in this abbreviated manner where I'm only doing 8 working sets in a session or whatever, but it keeps me focused. And I've also realized that something around 40 minutes, my intensity diminishes. Like when I was doing these upper lower sessions in my prior split and I would be in there 60 to 75 minutes, I just remember the last like 20 to 30 minutes just wishing for the session to be over. And I never have that sense in the way I'm training right now. I'm just so excited and then boom, it's done. A lot of positives.
Even probably like beforehand too, and your motivation going into it, knowing it's 40 minutes is on the front end, probably super beneficial too.
For sure. Yeah, yeah.
So you're keeping it under 40 minutes, which is nice. I definitely think if you can get in some solid session in under 40 minutes, I think that's awesome. Because I just think that the mental fatigue and the motivation of a training session really does impact your performance. I think more than people think. Some people, I think if you really enjoy weight training, it's like you can push through that. But for most people, it's like you do want that to be in line as much as possible there. What is like the rest times and stuff like that look like? How are you able to squeeze it in 40 minutes?
Yeah, so I'm doing at no more than 8 working sets in a session on any day. So back has 8, chest has 8, shoulders have 8, and arms have 12, but that's because I'm doing 6 for biceps and 6 for triceps, and I'm able to alternate those back and forth, save time. And then hamstrings and quads each have 7. The way I'm doing it essentially is that the first exercise gets 2 or 3 warm-up sets, and then the next exercises after that get maybe 1 warm-up set, depending on what I'm doing. Like on a cable bicep curl, I'm probably doing 0 warm-up sets, but on the dumbbell fly, maybe I'm doing 1 warm-up set prior. And for the warm-up set, I'm simply doing 75% of my working weight for 5 reps. So it's really fast, it's non-fatiguing. I'm just priming the muscle to the heavier load. And then boom, I'm into the working sets. And so when I say I'm doing 8 working sets, I'm probably only doing 12 total sets. So yeah, it's been not a non-issue. Like 12 into 40 goes 3 1/3 times. So that leaves me about 2.5 minutes of rest between sets. I'll usually take a little bit less rest in the warm-up sets so that maybe I get a little bit more on like the heaviest set of the big compound movement for the day or whatever. But it's been cool too because it's also changed my focus away from just progressive overload, where I will oftentimes rest to complete fatigue cessation because I'm like, I have to get 6 reps with the hundreds on incline dumbbell or something like that. And now I simply I wouldn't say I'm chasing like metabolic stress or the pump or anything like that. I'm chasing stimulus, but there does seem to be an uptick in pump and metabolic stress as a result of chasing stimulus with slightly shorter rest periods.
And correct me if I'm wrong, but even just training the same muscle group throughout the entire session too, right? It's probably going to impact that.
Yeah, for sure. Absolutely. It's just increased metabolic stress in general. Because it's also like I've essentially 1.5 times the amount of volume per muscle group that I'm doing compared to my upper lower split that I was doing before, which is wild if you do the math. Because if I was doing 60 to 75-minute sessions 4 times a week, that is basically like 4+ hours of training across the week. And now I'm doing sub 40-minute sessions 6 times a week. It's literally the exact same amount of training across the week, but I'm fitting in 1.5 times the amount of volume per muscle group this way by structuring it in this manner with this slightly shorter rest periods, less systemic demand. Like training just chest, as hard as it is, you're isolating the fatigue to one area versus when I'm doing an upper lower split, it's like half my body is getting destroyed.
Yeah. You can just isolate it to that one muscle group there versus like everything. What are some exercises that you're doing right now? You don't have to go through every single one, but what are some ones that you're liking and doing right now?
So I'm starting each lift with a compound movement and then going into a short position movement for the most part, and then finishing with a lengthened position movement. So that's the general structure and setup. And so I guess not necessarily the main movement from each one, but I've really, the fly press with the cables has been so nice. I've just been like, I'm a fan of the fly press with the dumbbells too. That's probably my second favorite movement. They're both, I just think for whatever reason, for me and the way my structure is, that fly press movement is so much more effective for me than more of a pressing style execution. I feel like I'm just able to get so much more out of it. So I specifically really like that cable fly press because the way I set it up is that it's a little bit more lengthened overloaded where the forearm is a little more perpendicular to the resistance at the stretched position, but it's still hard because of the mechanical disadvantage. It's still hard in the short position as well. So it's just like a thorough, amazing beating for the chest on that one. And then on back, I don't have a ton of options on back simply because of my home gym, but I'm doing a T-bar row to start. Then I'm doing a neutral grip pull down. And then I'm finishing with a wide to narrow row. And that's actually been a new one for me. I haven't really done a cycle where I've really focused on the wide to narrow row. But basically, what I do is I grab a D handle from each one of the arms of the functional trainer and I set my bench up far enough back that I can still get like full extension of the arms. So what I have to do is like wedge something between the functional trainer and my bench to create like a barrier so the bench doesn't slide. But once that's set up, that motion going from wide to narrow, the elbows naturally come into that kind of rear delt upper back position where they gently settle in that like hybrid 45-degree position. The arms naturally settle into a semi-pronated position and it feels like super smooth. Been a big fan of that one.
Real quick on your back before we go to the other
Yeah.
ones. You said you're doing T-bar row. Is that upper back focus as well too? That
It's
T-bar row?
neutral grip because it feels better for me to do it neutral grip on my shoulders, but I'm performing it with a neutral grip, but with a little more focus or less focus on driving the elbows back and down and more focus on letting the kind of just the full back do the work. I feel like the fact that it's a sagittal plane pull, given the neutral grip, but it's a horizontal pull, it has that unique or more general, rather, exposure to the various back structures.
I don't know if I'm right in my thinking here, but I feel like out of when I look at back, like the lat specific row is always the one that I'm like less likely to like. That's like lowest on the priority list for whatever reason. I don't know if my thinking is right on that, or if I don't know what it is, but I just if we're gonna do if we think back and you can only do 3 exercises, it's usually gonna be like a upper back pull down, neutral grip pull down, or some sort of upper back row versus like a lat row. I don't know if there's anything to that or anything, but that just seems to be like the one that always falls like lower on the priority list.
Yeah, I think I agree 100% with you. And I think the reason is that to fully get the lower lat structures, you need to pull vertically. You're never going to be able to get the lower lats pulling horizontally. So that horizontal row, even if it's elbows tucked type setup, is still going to be more of a like upper lat with maybe a little bit of the lumbar mid lat in there. And I think that the upper lat also gets trained pretty well through upper back training. Like while the trap in the rear delts are still going to be the dominant structures, you're still getting a ton of stimulus to the upper lats doing it. And so I agree with you that there's just no reason to extra bias that area when you could spend that time doing a vertical pull.
And I just find that with clients that is always the one like it's the one that gets messed up the most too is the
Yeah,
lat focus
yeah,
row. It's like
yeah,
hard, like the hardest one to figure out because everyone naturally does more of a upper back row too. Which does that mean
yeah.
that maybe it is something that you need to work on? I don't know, but yeah, for whatever reason, that just seems to be the one that gets programmed the least or falls up by the wayside the most.
Yeah, yeah.
Cool. What about some of the other muscle groups?
So for quads, I'm doing pendulum as the main movement, then leg extension for the short movement, and then sissy squats for the final movement. Occasionally, sometimes, depending on how I'm feeling, I'll do one set of sissies and one set of dumbbell reverse lunges. But oftentimes, I just end up doing 2 sets of sissies because it's already warmed up and it's there. And then doing heavy reverse lunges is really hard. Yeah.
With reverse lunges, are we looking at that's mainly going to be more glute focus, or does it just depend on how you do it?
I think it's how you do it, but naturally it is going to be more glute focused. It's a glute and quad movement is the way I would look at it. But any single leg squat pattern movement, unless it's performed in an extremely quad dominant manner, I think the glute is just going to take over and be the dominant structure.
That's the thing with the glutes, man. I feel like the glutes are something that people want these specific glute exercises, but man, there's really a lot of carryover to the glutes, really
Yeah.
in everything that you do. And I think a lot of people forget that, right? They think glute training's only like hip thrusts or like kickbacks when there's so many, like you're getting
Yeah.
your glutes in pretty much every lower body you're doing minus maybe like leg extensions or something like that.
Yeah, I mean, I think if I'm going to take the glutes out of it, doing what I'm doing with pendulum, then leg extension, then sissy squat is about as like absent of glute that you can possibly get. And so that's why I threw that lunge in there. And I actually try to perform it in a more glute dominant manner for that reason. But to your point, there's plenty of glutes when you're hip hinging too. And so on my hamstring day, I'll get glutes there as well. Yeah.
Do you do any hip thrusts or anything like that?
Never. No, I don't do any hip thrusts. I'll sometimes use cable kickbacks, the glute med one, as a warm up for squatting movements if my knees are feeling a little shaky, which they've actually been feeling amazing this last year. I haven't really done much cable glute kickbacking either. But one of the big changes I've made to my squatting patterns are that I'm no longer going ass to grass as more of a focus to get the adductors and the glutes out of my squat pattern movement and better bias the quads. So I'm essentially keeping my feet narrower, slightly internally rotating into the big toe as I descend, but not enough that the knees cave in, and then stopping depth at the point right before or at the point where my knees would want to bow out as a way to get more depth. And the crazy thing about that, aside from how freaking effective it is, in that my quads were literally sore for 6 days this week. Like I'm supposed to train quads today and they just stopped being sore yesterday. And so the other crazy thing is that the weight I'm using, even though I'm using a smaller range of motion, I'm only able to use 2/3 of the weight that I could use for the full range of motion.
Yeah, which is counterintuitive, right? Like people would think that getting that deeper range of motion would make it harder. And it does. And I feel like a different way. But like you said, when you
Yeah.
bias the quads like that and you stop short, like that's, again, it sounds counterintuitive. But for me, that's been a hard thing to do with my squats, heels elevated, is not going as low. And I know you and I
Yeah.
had this conversation with my pendulums too, where you're like, dude, you're going too low. Like you need to stop a little bit higher because then you don't like it's not as quad biased at
Yeah.
that point. But yeah, it's super interesting. So are you going like to what people would call depth, or do you feel like you're having to stop a little bit higher than that to get
I'm
that?
stopping at what would be like a 90-degree angle between
Okay.
my thighs and my calves. So I would be like right at parallel.
But for some people though, they could potentially have to stop a little bit higher than that. They might not even be going to depth to hit their quads. Or do you think?
I think most people can likely get to around parallel. You're right, though, maybe some a little higher, some a little lower. I think anything below parallel, actually, you start to need to externally rotate to simply create space. So maybe even like that parallel point is the bottom of where most people would be expected to go.
I think the having to do lesser weight though is super interesting. And I guess that is just because you're just putting the tension on the quads there
Yeah,
and
smaller muscle group.
yeah, super interesting. Cool. Is there any other exercises that you're
Oh,
digging or
yes.
anything?
So shoulders, I'm doing the lying Y raise, which is just like one of my favorites ever. That one's always in there. Doing some wide to narrow front raises, doing an anterior delt press and a one arm cable behind the back lateral raise. So that's pretty thorough shoulder work. Arms, mostly the same old stuff. Like the seated face away curl is the best. That's the goat. I'm doing a one arm cable preacher using my incline bench as the resting point for my arm, and that's been
It's a good one.
pretty effective. I think the goat tricep exercise is one arm overhead
Oh yeah.
cable. So I have that one in there, and I just can't get away from doing it one arm. It's just the best. Yeah. And then hamstrings is leg curls, RDLs, and sometimes I do 45-degree. Sometimes I'll do two versions of seated leg curl, one where I'm seated back and it's more short overloaded, and one where I lean forward and use a bigger plate diameter on the machine and it's more lengthened overloaded. So just depend what I'm feeling in that regard. But the other nice thing about this bro split, which has been the freedom for me, is once I do my main compound for the day, and that's the one I'm like mostly tracking progression on, I allow myself a bit of freedom as far as what I do with the rest of the session. Like I have the general idea of what I want going in. Sometimes I'll do the lunge, sometimes I won't. Sometimes I'll do 45 degrees, sometimes I won't. Like different bits of freedom with exercise selection.
Are you basing that off of how you feel or what you feel like you need, what you haven't done the last couple of weeks, or what?
I'd say it's both motivation and like what my body feels would feel good on it.
That's something I've been trying to work on, man. It's just like a little bit more flexibility with training. I think having for some people and for a while, having that structure where you're not just randomly changing things just to change things is good. But I do think at some point it's probably good to build in some flexibility and have that to where you don't feel like you need to do the same exact thing every single week on the same day. Like having a little bit of that flexibility, I think is good. And probably as you have more things going on outside of the gym and stuff like that can help with recovery and things like that. So just having more flexibility from day to day on there
Yeah, I mean,
within guardrails though, of course.
yeah, that's why I think always doing the first main movement that you're actually like focused on and whether that's progressing or not is a nice North Star to keep track of. And then after that, having more freedom allows you to increase motivation to train. So you're not just simply going in trying to beat the logbook all the time on every exercise you do, but also the novelty of stimulus too. Like studies have even shown that initially when things get changed, there is a spark of progress. And if we're going to chase hypertrophy and it's not about strength or beating the logbook or whatever, then in some ways, like progressive overload is simply whether you're providing more stimulus, not necessarily whether you're lifting more actual weight.
Yeah, again, like you said, it comes down really to the stimulus when it comes to hypertrophy. How did you fall on 8 sets? Is that just based on like research, what you found's worked for you? Yeah, where did you fall on the eight
Yeah, it's
sets?
around that point where I start to feel like my muscle is so pumped and fatigued that any further sets that I do feel like I'm not really actually stimulating the intended musculature anymore. I learned this back in the early days when I was doing RP, so call like 2017, 18 or something like that, where I first found Dr. Mike and RP and the idea of like high volume training. Like the more volume you can do, the better type thing. And he had his ramping protocol where you would start low after deload week, and then every week you would add a set or whatever. And I always felt like when I would get to the point of the cycle where I was doing more than 10 sets for a muscle group in a session, it just never felt like I was still training the muscle in the
Mm.
same way. And so I realized at that point that around 10 was my sweet spot cutoff point. And then after that, Krieger came out with that analysis where he found that 8 to 10 sets was the most that you can do without these like severe diminishing returns in a session. And that aligned with it. And then now I feel like now that I'm slightly better at creating stimulus or whatever, I've found 8 to be a sweet spot with 7 for legs. And it's insane that like I cannot, I have not had my quads be this sore for this long to have it last 6 days.
It's
And I
insane.
was like struggling to walk downstairs for 6 days. And that was insane to me that I could do that to myself from 7 sets. But here we are.
I do think it's a skill that you build over time, right? Is really like providing a better stimulus, right? In less
Yeah.
time, I think is a skill that you continue to develop there. But what's like your RIR that you're training with? Is it depend on the exercise or depend on the week or what are you training with the
Yeah,
RIR?
I would say most things are zero RIR. Like for back stuff, I take my final set to failure plus partials. For chest, basically everything's 0 to 1 RIR. Like I'm very rarely failing a rep, but it's happened. So I'll usually succeed on the last rep and just know that's my last rep and there's nothing else I can do on it. For things like pendulum, RDLs, I don't think I've taken a single set of RDLs to failure, but like all of my leg curls sets are to failure. Pendulum's probably 0 to 2 RIR. Like I'd say the last rep is shaky, but I could maybe do another one in most cases.
Do you think that training closer to zero RIR with everything is the byproduct of doing this kind of bro split and coming back to you don't feel as like systemically fatigued and that fatigue's more isolated to one muscle, so you're able to train close to failure most days?
Yeah, yeah. Training to failure is also a contrast or needs to be accounted for against volume. And I don't know, like you can make the argument that like training to failure all the time is fine if you're just not doing a ton of volume.
Yeah.
And you could make the argument that you should never train to failure if you're doing a lot of volume. Yeah, I think because the frequency is low, I feel the need to maybe push it a little bit harder. But I also like, I have this sense that when things aren't to failure, I can just do so much more. Like, I think I can probably do 2 sets to failure for an exercise compared to 4 or 5 sets if I'm even at 2 to 3 RIR. Like, that to me feels like an equivalent stimulus. And so in most cases, I'm just going to opt to go to failure and do less work than to have another quote unrack of whatever the movement is you're doing. Get into position, set myself, mentally prepare. Because 2 to 3 RIR is still a hard set. But to do 4 or 5 of those when I could just do 2, because once you're in it, once you're there and you're at 2 to 3 RIR, you're like, shit, I'm already here. And
As
I just
well.
do 2 or 3 more reps and just take it to the house. Like, I don't know. To me, it seems crazy to do extra work and not go to failure.
Yeah, no, I mean that's a good point you bring up. Yeah, it's like you're already there, might as well. And then again, there's the that's extra rest time. Then you gotta mentally prepare for that next set. And like you said, 2 to 3 RIR should still be hard, especially on something like a pendulum squat or something like that.
Yeah.
Cool. What about your cardio? Are you doing? Where's that fitting in right now? And what does that look like?
Yeah, it's a good question. That's actually the only downside to this setup, honestly. Psychologically, I love waking up in the morning and having one hard physical thing to do each day. And I don't love waking up and having 2 hard physical things to do each day. Like it really drives me crazy to have to do 2. And so what's really ended up happening here is that one day a week I'll force myself to double up and do like shoulders and then do some cardio. and that's been fine 1 day a week. And then the other cardio session I'll put on my off day from the weights so that I only have one hard thing to do. And because I'm only getting 2 cardio sessions a week in, I've pretty much been making both of them interval, like zone 4 type sessions, feeling like that's probably going to preserve my fitness the best until I can get back into doing like longer endurance stuff in the spring. So yeah, everything's been between 40 and 60 minutes. Like yesterday, I took a day off from the gym and I went out and ran. I ran 2 miles, zone 3, and then I did 2.5 miles of intervals. Got 4.5 miles in. It took me like 45 minutes or something. And that was just perfect. That's probably like a typical cardio session that I'm doing right now.
And you're running?
Yeah, mostly running. My wife convinced me to do a Peloton ride the other day, and I did a 60-minute class ride. It was insanely stupid. I put a poll out on my story afterwards, and I was like, for people that Peloton, how many of you do 60-minute class rides? And 80% of people said no. And I was like, yeah, it's deranged. That's an insane, like long, miserable, arduous grind to get through this class, and it destroyed me. Like in that 1 hour, I spent 45 minutes in zone 4 or zone 5. So
Yeah.
it's just like too much.
And is that because of how they have the class set up? Like they try to push you and like try to get people to go as hard as they can during that time as well too?
Yeah, and then they give you these ranges where they're like, okay, we're gonna do our cadence between 70 and 90, and we're gonna do your resistance between 65 and 75 or 60 and 75 or something like that. And so I always, of course, I'm like, I'm a fucking badass. So I'm going to put the resistance up super high. And then I'm like, shit, now I'm barely even getting the bottom of the cadence that they want because my resistance is up. And I'm like I'm basically pushing myself into zone 4 or zone 5 throughout the session. If I were to look at their recommendations and take the lower side of them instead of the higher side, I could probably do it in like zone 3, zone 4. So it's also a factor of what I'm doing to myself during the session.
Is that across the board though for everyone, regardless of fitness? They're not asking you your fitness level, right? Or would that scale to the person's fitness
No,
level?
they're giving you a range, and then based on your self-perceived fitness level, you choose. Yeah.
Because the reason I bring this up is I do have a client. He likes to do Peloton rides and he does 3. And I've had to tell him so many times, like, I need you to dial back because like you're doing a lot, and it's in his 50s. Man, yeah, I think he's in his late 50s. And he was telling me how his numbers are, his resting heart rate's a little bit higher. His numbers aren't going up. His numbers are down from years ago. I'm like, you're just probably going like the way they have it set up is you're just like, yeah, that's good. You're getting that cardio stimulus, but it's probably a bit too much. And it's like, you're just a lot of junk volume almost in a way.
Yeah, you can probably, that's a good way of saying it. You can probably get the stimulus with less fatigue.
Yeah, that's interesting that you did that. Is there options to do shorter time frames or 60?
Yeah. Oh, yeah. They have like 15s, 20s, 30s, 45s, whatever. My wife exclusively does 30s or 45s. And 45s for her are like a monumental achievement. You got to really almost like succumb to this idea that you're going to be fucked for like the next hour afterwards. You can't just finish one of those and then just go about your life. I remember after my 60-minute one, like I sat there sweating, like dripping sweat in a pool for 10 minutes before I could move. Then I like played on my phone for 5 minutes. Then I like meandered and walked around the house trying to like loosen up for 10 minutes. And then 10 minutes after that, I'm finally able to take a shower. So it's like an entire almost hour of my time post-workout that's spent like recovering from the workout.
That's hilarious.
Yeah.
Are you like still tracking your HRV and resting heart rate and stuff like that?
Yeah, I've been quite discouraged by the fact that since I started TRT on December 22nd, my resting heart rate is up and my HRV in accordance with that is down. And so I've been doing a lot of research into this, and it turns out this is like totally normal. In the first 3 to 6 months when starting TRT, your sympathetic nervous system is ramped up as you try to replace your current hormone profile with the new structure of hormones running through your body. And so this is all as expected, but I've been bummed about it because I literally have 10 years of data where my HRV has been consistently the same and my resting heart rate has been consistently the same. And now suddenly for the last 5 or 6 weeks, my resting heart rate is up like 8 beats and my HRV is down 10%-ish. So it's been frustrating. All my apps are like giving me bad feedback.
Are you still using Apple for your metrics?
I use Apple as the baseline stuff, but every morning I use my Polar H10 chest strap for my Elite HRV app.
Okay.
And that's the one I put more credence in since it's
Yep.
got way more information coming from it.
Yep. And what you said, the HRV is down 10% on average, what it was.
Usually the score is actually, if I'm looking at the RMSSD or the SDNN numbers, it's actually down more than 10%. But I was looking at the score, like each HRV gives you a 1 to 100 score, and I was consistently 79 for like ever. And now I'm down to 72, 71 sometimes. So based on the raw, like 1 to 100 score, it's 10%. But if you look at the actual HRV numbers, they're down more than 10%, maybe 20%.
And resting heart rate, you said about 8 beats
Eight
higher right
eight
now.
beats up.
So
Yeah,
was
it's
that put you
right
in the 50s?
49 or 50. Yeah.
Oh, that's still good at that number. Do you notice a difference?
So this is what I've been talking to ChatGPT a lot about this because it's been on my mind, obviously. And ChatGPT is basically like I'll feed in my data overnight, like what my heart rate gets down to overnight versus what my heart rate's at during HRV time and stuff like that. And so my heart rate is still getting down to 44-ish overnight, which is obviously lower than the 49 that I'm getting when I'm doing my HRV testing. And so ChatGPT is telling me that it's okay, like when my body needs to get parasympathetic, it's still getting parasympathetic at night. But what's happening is that the TRT is making me more, it's increasing the cortisol in the morning, which is actually what you want. It's increasing my preparedness, so to speak. But because I'm waking up like more prepared for the day, it's like my resting heart rate immediately goes up, and that is causing the correlated decrease in HRV because HRV measures the distance between heartbeats. So if your heart is beating faster, you're going to have less distance between those heartbeats. HRV goes down. So ChatGPT says I really just need to stop worrying about it, and this is all what's supposed to be happening and whatever. But ChatGPT can be a little sycophantic, so I don't always take it with 100% confidence.
Well, what's the word you sit to faint? I've never even heard that.
Sycophantic. It's like the people that just tell you that you're right all the time.
It
Trump has a lot of sycophantic people right
it
now.
does definitely do that. You have to tell it to not do that, I feel like.
Yeah, yeah, totally. I've told it that. I'm like, stop treating me like I'm a prince and I know everything or that whatever. And they're like, here's the raw data. And they'll do that thing like, I'm not going to sugarcoat it anymore for you. All right, thank you.
They're like, all right, Sir Brian, I will not sugarcoat
Right.
anything for you anymore.
Right.
I have to consistently tell it to do that because I'm like, I don't want you to just tell me what you think I want to hear. Actually,
Right.
tell me because it does do that. But so then so it sounds like you don't really feel like anything from a recovery standpoint. What about overall, like in terms of how you're feeling with getting on?
Overall, what I'm chasing with TRT is energy, drive, motivation, and focus. Those are like the big long-term allures that I've been sold with TRT. I can't say that I've experienced any of those in any profound manner yet. Apparently those effects begin to take hold in like the 8 to 12 week time frame. Around this time I should be like beginning to experience them, and maybe I could say, yeah, maybe I'm beginning to experience them, but there hasn't been like a profound change in that regard yet. Libido has been up and then it's normalized. So I don't know, it was fun. It was up for a little while and now it's like back to normal, which is not as cool. And then beyond that, the only like really overwhelming positive has been this last week. So the last 7 nights minus 1 night where I went out drinking and slept like shit. But 6 of the 7 last nights, something has miraculously changed in my sleep. And ChatGPT says this is right around the time frame that TRT might assist your sleep if it's going to assist your sleep. I have had a sleep score of 93 or higher every of those 6 nights, with 3 of them 98s or 99s. And for me, this is insane because I'm an average like 88, 89 out of 100 type sleeper. And usually the reason I get dinged is because I wake up twice a night to go pee, and then I would struggle, I wouldn't say I struggle to fall back asleep, but it wasn't like my head hits the pillow and I'm right back asleep. It's like I have to do some breathing and maybe calm my mind down, and then 10 or 15 minutes later, I'll fall back asleep. Fine. That's totally normal. Now I wake up once a night. For the last 6 of 7 nights, I've woken up once a night, quick pee, right back to bed, don't even remember anything. I just head hits the pillow, right back to sleep. My app has been telling me that my awake time is under 10 minutes every night. And I've been getting 2 hours of REM and 1 hour of deep. And it's just been insane. That is for sure the best thing that's come of it thus far. And I just hope that it stays and doesn't disappear like the libido thing. Oh, back to normal again.
Yeah, this is what it could feel like, and now back to normal. Have you noticed a difference in how you feel there then? I'm assuming you feel better then overall, like energy-wise, training-wise, everything like that with the better sleep, or you not really noticed a difference yet?
No, I haven't really noticed it yet, to be honest. I don't know. I've just realized that through all of this. I need to just let things happen as they happen. And maybe I can't physiologically hack all of the things that are happening so much. I just need to ride the wave and let it be. That's pretty much where I'm at.
What do you, how often do you have, I'm assuming at some point you'll get blood work done and see where it's at and see if you need to go a little bit higher. I'm assuming there's got to be some like kind of trial and error with like dose to start, right? Or is it like, nope, this is what it's just going to be? And
So yes, you're 100% right. I need to get blood work every 6 weeks. That's one of the stipulations to being on TRT is you have to do at least the hormone profile every 6 weeks. You don't have to do obviously the lipids and the blah 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 and all metabolic and all that stuff. I am doing a full profile because I don't think I've had blood work done for 6 or 9 months at this point. So on February 3rd, I'm doing a full panel of everything and we'll get all the data on all the testosterone and stuff at that point. I don't want to increase dose. I'm really hoping that I can stay on what would be considered like a low dose TRT and that's sufficient for me. I'm on 100 milligrams a week, like 50 milligrams twice a week. And I don't know. I feel like if I'm going to be on TRT, I like being able to say I'm on low dose TRT and not to be like, yeah, I'm just straight up on TRT. And I also feel totally happy if my levels just settle in like the 6 to 800 range. That would be totally cool for me coming from the 3 to 400 range. Let's just double that. That'd be cool. So yeah, I feel pretty confident that this should get me there. I've noticed the trend of effects as they mostly should be happening chronologically, and it seems like it's like doing what it's supposed to do thus far.
cool. Yeah, no, that's awesome. Anything else you want to share? Any other insights you've had with TRT so far? Anything like that?
I would just say that initially, when I went to dose it, I had a whole week where I wasn't actually dosing it at all because I watched this one YouTube tutorial video, and this was my naivety. I should have watched more. But the guy literally like he inserts the needle into his vial, he pulls the handle back, he jabs himself, pushes the handle in, and boom, he's done. This YouTube video was under a minute long. And so I was like, oh, that's clearly how easy it must be. You just pull the thing, you put it in, you do the blah blah, whatever. So after 3 or 4 injections, I looked at my bottle and it's only supposed to have 4 injections worth of liquid in it. And I looked at my bottle after 3 injections and I was like, it doesn't look like there's any liquid missing from here at all. And then I did the fourth one and I was like, yep, still got a full bottle here. No liquid missing. What is going on? So I hit Straker up and I showed him like my video of me doing it. And I was like, see, I'm doing everything right. And he's like, nah, dude, it takes a couple minutes for the oil to like drip into the needle.
It's hilarious.
Like you can't just pull the thing back and jam it into you. And I was like, oh, and he's totally right. It literally takes me 2 or 3 minutes to let the oil almost let gravity do its work to get this like viscous liquid into the syringe needle and then into the syringe and whatever. So it's like this annoying process, but I wish I would have known way earlier. Could have started TRT a week or 2 weeks prior, but my first proper dose was December 22nd. So that's what I'm counting as my start date.
So you're injecting it yourself then?
Yeah. So I'm doing sub Q. Some people do intramuscular, which goes into like the glute or the quad or whatever, but I'm doing sub Q. So it just goes into the fat of my abdomen or love handles.
Nice. And you don't mind doing that? Because I would imagine for some people that's something they wouldn't necessarily want to do.
I have no problem with needles. In fact, the last 3 weeks, Dave convinced me to buy a glucose testing kit and prick my finger a bunch of times. And so I've probably pricked my finger like 150 times over the last 3 weeks and have like endless amounts of data now on the way my body responds to glucose, which has been super interesting and fun. But just to make the point that I really have no problem with needles.
Well, that's a good topic. What led to that?
Mostly Dave's curiosity into how my body processes sugar under various conditions. And then we've just had a side chat where we just send our results back and forth for the last few weeks under like this type of meal or fasted or this type of meal or blah, 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 and just compare notes on how our body processes it.
It's super interesting because I think people think it's just black or white thing. When you really look into it, there's so many things that are going to impact how your body reacts to that. Like you said, stress. I think all these things can impact it. So like for you, what have been some insights there? Where you sitting at? And yeah, what does that look like?
Yeah. So the most interesting one to me, I guess it's related. There's two kind of related things. One is that my body does an amazing job at clearing glucose once insulin comes in. So when I eat food, glucose goes up a little bit, insulin comes in, shuts that shit down, glucose goes back down like it's supposed to, and voila, life goes on. That means I have good insulin sensitivity and I'm healthy. What has been less encouraging, at least initially for me, was that when I wake up in the morning and test my glucose from bed, like essentially just wash my hands, test my glucose immediately upon waking in the morning, it's been much higher than I would have expected, like in the low 100s, like 105, 110, 115. And so obviously I was quite concerned about this. Pulled up my little AI chat bot, the Dawn phenomenon, but also Dawn phenomenon more emphasized for me than most people because I do intermittent fasting and don't eat until noon. And so because I don't eat and I've set this precedent for my body that there's no food coming in, there's no insulin coming in to clear glucose away, it over releases glucose from my liver as a means of powering me throughout the morning until I can eat.
That makes sense. Well, you also said your cortisol is like really high in the morning too, right?
Correct.
Like,
Yeah, they're all related. Yeah, the cortisol goes up, which is amplified because of the TRT, and then the glucose comes in from the liver in a response to the cortisol, and there you go. It's a perfect pie of me having like high glucose under fasted conditions. But like I've done so much research on this because I was worried about it. I was like, dude, if my fasting glucose is in the hundreds, like that's pre-diabetic. I have a problem. And everything is basically no, like you're an anomaly. This is Dawn phenomenon. It's totally common of people with high muscle mass and cortisol release in the morning and intermittent fasting and all these things. They're like, what really matters is what happens when you eat food
and it
the
clears.
insulin comes in. So one cool thing I realized is that A, my insulin is really effective. I also realized that when I go have an insane cheat meal, like way overboard cheat meal, like I'm talking, we went to BJ's and I ate like probably 2,500 or 3,000 calories, finishing it off with a Pizookie, which is like a warm chocolate chip cookie with ice cream on it. And
well, I'm curious, what did you have in that meal? So you had the cookie and stuff like that. What else did
yeah,
you
that
have
was
for
what
the meal?
finished it. I had, so we started with barbecue chicken wings with
Oh,
ranch.
nice.
Then I had the Brussels sprouts, which are like deep fried and whatever.
Yep.
Then
It's a veggie though.
right, totally. That's how I think about it. Then my kids' food came before my food did, so I ate a bunch of sweet potato fries and
There you
one of
go.
my daughter's little side hamburgers. And then my dinner came and it was a full hamburger with a cheeseburger with an onion ring on it and barbecue sauce and a bun and a side of fries. And then my son was ordering, he wanted an order of chicken tenders and he didn't eat them. So I had two chicken tenders and some of his fries. And then we had the dessert afterwards. And I think I had a beer in there as well. So that was like the full meal. I think it was like probably close to 3,000 calories when I went back and ran it through. And at that one, I never saw a number like at 180, which is what you would expect if you're just having a straight carbohydrate meal. So I think the fact that there was a lot of fat in my meal really quelled the peak, so to speak.
And protein too. You had a lot of protein in that meal too.
So it quelled the peak in that the highest peak I saw was like 162, which is still way too freaking high for health. But then it just kept going. It flattened the curve, so it never peaked as high. But 3 hours later, I was still at 152, and it took almost 4 hours before I dropped below 140, which is like that magical cutoff of you're like, yeah, you probably shouldn't go above 140 too often. If you're a healthy person, going above 140 is not going to kill you every now and then, but being above 140 is not great for you. And it took me almost 4 hours to get down there. It doesn't surprise me based on what I ate. Yeah, my body should probably struggle to clear that. But at the same time, it was insightful to learn that maybe I shouldn't do that so often.
What time did you have that meal? And then what did you do after that meal? Did you
Yeah, so that meal ended at 5 p.m.
Okay.
And I didn't do anything after that meal. I didn't do any exercise or movement or anything. Had I done some movement afterwards, I'm sure I could have been under 140 relatively quickly. That was actually another thing that I learned. So my standard lunch meal is broccoli, chicken teriyaki, white rice, and fruit. So that's like pretty much what I eat every day at around noon to break my fast. When I do that meal and then don't move at all, I'm just under 140 at the 1 to 1.5 hour mark, which is where glucose peaks. I'll be at like 137, 138, which is great. Like I'm really glad that my body can handle that and keep it under 140 and all of that. That's good stuff. I do that same meal and then I either go run or do a lift workout and then test my glucose at the same time frame, like 60 to 90 minutes. It's 104.
Yep.
99. It's insane. It literally acts as if I didn't even eat any carbs at all. It just absorbs all of it.
I think that, yeah. In the research, they show that post-meal movement really can help a ton there. So that's why I was curious when you had it, what you did afterwards, which, like you said, that meal, no matter what, would have spiked it. But I'd be curious to see if you would have been able to go for 15-minute walk or something. We did that when I was in Denver, right? We ended up
Yeah.
going for a nice little walk after the meal. And like that does help. I think that helps with obviously the blood sugar regulation, but also digestion as well too. And you get a little bit more movement, right? It kills multiple
Yeah.
birds with one stone there.
So my understanding is that walking is so low intensity that it likely helps a little bit more with the digestive processes
And
and
then the blood sugar.
less with the glucose. I think you'll get like an 8 to 12 peak decrease when you walk like that after a meal. But that would take that meal potentially from a 162 to a 154 or something like that. Like nothing super
Nothing
meaningful
crazy.
compared to going and doing like a chest session or a back session, and I can basically completely flatten that curve almost immediately. So that was eye-opening.
I wonder too if it does, like for somebody like you, yeah, just going for a walk probably is not going to drop glucose as much as someone that is easily hits 180, 200, and then they don't ever move. And it's like that, they may see something different. But for someone like you, that's okay. That the intensity is just not going to be enough. But the other thing I wanted to bring up with that meal too is my understanding too is obviously the timing of it. Now I'd be curious to see what yours looks like since you have a later eating pattern there. But from my understanding, based on your chronotype and your circadian rhythm, as you get later into the day, your regulation of that may not be as good either. And that's going to be something that could impact. It's like timing. So I don't know if you've noticed that with it as well, too.
Yeah, I'm definitely worse at clearing later in the day. Like my insulin is still quite strong. It doesn't really seem to matter what time of day. If I eat within normal human patterns where I'm not doing an excessive cheat meal and I'm simply having a normal, like relatively balanced protein, carb, fat portion of a mixed meal, like chicken, rice, and broccoli, something like that, my body will handle that fine later in the day too. I'll stay under 140. Everything will clear as it's supposed to. But it does. I guess I never cheat in the morning. But my sense would be that if I were to like go ham on some French toast and pancakes and do that whole thing at 10 a.m., my guess would be that I do a better job of clearing it than I would at that same meal at 5 p.m. But yeah, tough to say.
Good excuse to go and do that.
Dude, I have not had shitty breakfast food like that in so long because I always fast until noon.
Yeah.
I never get the enjoyment of like French toast, pancakes, waffles, like any of that stuff. And even on the cruise ship where we just were for the holidays, and I thought one day I was like, I'll just wake up and go ham on some French toast because I love French toast with whipped cream on it or whatever. And I never did because I knew I was going to feel so shitty the rest of the day that I was like, I'd much rather just do that later at night where I can just nicely settle into food coma and go to sleep.
Yeah, I got Allie and Colby some donuts the other day, and I had some in the morning and also had some Kodiak pancakes with it too. And you definitely feel different when you have that, right? Like I definitely feel like the rest of the day, my hunger is higher, everything like that. Like I can just, and then you do get into that lull where you don't feel as good when there, no matter what the timing of it is.
I also have that psychological disorder where as soon as I have something crappy and eat poorly, I immediately proclaim that the whole day is ruined and it's just a cheat day. So the longer I can push that off, the better off I am.
Hey, there's some psychology to it for sure. I will say I had hockey that day, so I knew that it was going to get used up pretty well there. But yeah, I think the key there is I think people do over like the blood sugar spikes and stuff like that. But like you said, no matter how you spin it, like if you're consistently getting over that 140, 160 mark, that's probably not good for overall health. But I think your overall health, metabolic health is going to be like helpful and help counteract some of that as you've seen in your situation. So
yeah, for sure.
So how often are you taking it? Are you still doing it regularly? Are you taking it multiple times a day? You're pricking your finger multiple times a day still, or are you backed off a little bit?
I've backed off a bit. I'm so curious about my fasting glucose levels. So I've actually now at this point, I've gotten to a point where I just trust that my body does what it's supposed to do when insulin comes in. And I know that working out is like the saving all. So I have been testing it a lot less later in the day, but I'm increasingly curious about what it's doing between 5 a.m. and 10 a.m. when I'm fasted. So I've still been pricking it every day a couple times during that period.
I didn't know you fasted till noon every day.
I've been doing it for years, probably like close to a decade, over a decade at this point.
Interesting. Is that just how you just eat in that way and everything like that, or?
Yeah, you can curate your body to react however by just simply doing things a given way. So I don't get hungry in the morning. I bet if I started eating in the morning, I'd probably start getting hungry in the morning because that would be what my body expects. But for me, it's really just a weight maintenance issue in that I've tried periods of time where I shift my eating earlier, but then I still get to the end of the day and I still find myself more hungry at night than in the beginning of the day. And so if I start eating earlier, I just end up eating more total calories throughout the day. Yeah. And when I push off eating till later, and I'm not even hungry, so it's not hard to do, then I just find that I eat less overall calories, and that seems to be good for me because I'll never eat food past 6 p.m. That's 6:30 maybe at the latest, but I try to eat dinner at 5:30 and be done before 6.
Really? So your eating window is really just 12 to 6 almost.
Yeah, I would say it's 6 hours is my
Wow.
average eating window. Yeah. Sometimes I'll go 10 to 5 or something like that, but yeah, for the most part it's noon to 6.
That surprises me. I would say getting in enough calories for your level of activity would probably be getting in enough protein and everything. I would think would be the biggest issue. But like you said, it works for you, so that's a huge piece of it. And I think any
Yeah.
way that you can find to moderate your caloric intake, like you need to do, it's just I don't know if I feel like you don't really work with as many people like from a nutrition perspective. But like I've just noticed that like for most people, if they try and eat that way, they end up eating later into the day, whereas you're still cutting it off at 6. But it's just I just find that it's people will overconsume calories that way. But again, if it works for you, like it,
Yeah.
cutting out a period of time where you don't eat definitely helps.
Get 3 meals in. I eat at like noon, 3, and 6. The 3 is probably more of a large snack, but I also would say that I'm not as hyper focused on getting a gram of protein per pound of body weight as I would be in my younger days. I would say for the last few years now, I've been pretty happy at that zero point 0.7 number. And so for me, like that's 140 grams. And that's been just so easy. Like across 3 meals for me, like I'll have 2 meals. Like the first one and the last one are going to have at least 8 ounces of meat in them. And so already there, you're like 100 grams. And then the middle one will be like protein bar plus some nuts and some cheese or something like that. So I'm pretty much up at that 140 without even having to count the protein that comes alongside carbs and stuff like that.
And I think too, if anyone's like listening to this, I think this is where like checking I think you're checking your biofeedback, your blood markers, your recovery. This is where, it becomes important, right? Because all those things are in check for you. So it's like you found a style of eating that works for you. And it's like you still have healthy metrics outside of that. And I think that's super important there. So checking on those things is important to see if that way of eating would work for you or not. Because I do think though that like for most people, unless you're just like a crazy endurance runner or you just have the super high output where like you need to eat thousands and thousands of calories, which for most people, more than they're not doing levels of activity, they're going to warrant more than 3 to 5,000 calories per day, right?
Yeah.
I do think that having a period of time where you're not consuming food is probably a good thing, right? So like having at least 10 to 12 hours, I think a day of not eating food is probably going to be good from a weight management, overall metabolic health standpoint, and even a digestion standpoint too, right? And then if you can work up to a little bit higher than that, I think that can work. It's just, can you stick to that and can you fit in everything that you need to in that time frame?
Yeah, Sachin Panda had a study. He's out of some university in.
He does a lot of circadian rhythm.
Yeah, exactly. So he did a study on glucose sensitivity or insulin sensitivity rather, using glucose. And he found that when you compared a group of people that was eating 16 and then 8 hours off compared to a group that was eating 8 hours on and 16 hours off, that the same diet with the same calories produced like hugely significant better insulin and glucose response in the group that was eating only 8 hours a day. So huge differences there.
Well, I just think too, like most people I think we need to learn how to, I think it's twofold. I think some people need to learn how to not eat every single time they feel somewhat hungry. I think that's a skill, but then also teaching your body to be able to go that period of time without feeling like it always needs constant food, I think is also like you want to get your body to that point. I think that comes back to metabolic health there.
Yep.
I guess Dr. Mike would phrase it, a metabolic flexibility there.
Dr. Mike Nelson.
Yeah, Dr. Yeah.
So many Dr. Mikes.
Yeah, true. Dr. Mike T. Nelson. Yep. Now you're making me want to get a glucometer. They're pretty cheap to get, aren't they?
Yeah, it was like under $30. It was $24 or something.
It's because that is good. I think it's good knowledge to know, like you said, right? What do different situations, how do certain situations impact how my body responds to that? And even certain foods too, right? I don't know if you've noticed anything with certain foods in terms of like specific foods of rice versus potatoes or anything like that.
I haven't so much, but I think that's more a product of doing the glucometer route as opposed to the CGM route. Because the CGM route, you'll just get so much more data. You get constant influx of data every time you eat. For me, man, Dave is crazy. Dave did an at-home OGTT, which is the sugar drink that you drink, and then you test your
it's like
glucose
75 grams, isn't it? Or something like that?
75 grams of straight glucose fasted, and then you don't move at all, and you test the way your insulin comes in and your glucose response curve or whatever. He did 2 pricks every 5 minutes throughout the entire 2 hours.
Oh, shit.
So I don't know how many pricks that is, but it's a lot. And I don't enjoy pricking my finger that much. So for me, that's probably the limiting factor in getting all that information is, I don't know, white rice to me does this one thing. I would assume white rice is probably about as high of a glycemic carbohydrate load that you're going to get from any of the carbohydrate sources, like compared to a potato or oatmeal or whole grain bread or like any of the other things that I eat. I think white rice has to be the simplest one that probably spikes it the most. So I guess I'm not really willing to just go through that exposure of testing it all against all these different foods.
Oh yeah, for sure. I think under the wrong person doing it would definitely get someone to be like, "Oh, I can't have any white rice." And it's like, yeah, I mean, that just naturally is going to spike it a little bit higher. And obviously, if you do it by itself, that's going to completely change it as well too.
Right.
And then all the
Right.
other hundreds of factors, not hundreds, but a lot of different factors that could change that from day to day and prick from prick. But yeah, no, that makes me really want to try and do that. So you got me. I think I'm going to do this.
So you gotta keep me updated and let me know how it goes. I'll add you to the chat with me.
Yeah. Is he just doing it? Same thing. He's just curious, kind of testing himself as well too.
Yeah, there's a joke, kind of tongue-in-cheek group that he and me and Straker are in together, and he calls it like the pre-diabetes group. And I think it came out of this, like Aaron's had some high fasted glucose readings in the past few years, where it'll be like in the 90s or something like that. And Dave, I think, has had some questionable responses on some of his glucose stuff as well. And then because I was doing all my testing and stuff, we created this group where we just share our information regarding it. And so yeah, I think it's mostly curiosity, but also was born in some semblance of truth as well.
I need to get Dave on the podcast. I've never had him on. Does he still do his podcast?
Oh yeah, yeah, he does his podcast a lot. It's on YouTube, primarily YouTube. I don't know if he still disseminates them out to Apple Podcasts or not, but he definitely does them on YouTube. And I'd recommend having him on, man. He's a super thoughtful, like really good guy to have on the podcast.
What does he do? Is he like a coach or is he a
He's a dentist. He
he's a
owns his own
dentist?
dentist practice, but he also does coaching as well.
That's insane. That's pretty cool. That's a nice kind of you have to talk to him about dental hygiene as well too.
Yeah, dude, do it all.
Because that's freaking important. So interesting. I didn't realize he was a dentist. Cool. Sweet, man. I know you said you need to hop off at 11:15. So anything
Yeah.
else going on? Anything else you want to let the audience know about or where they can find you or anything? I feel like at this point they know where exactly to find you, but just to remind them or if you have anything coming out here soon on your end.
Yeah, no, not really. Like my podcast, Eat, Train, Prosper. I started a new podcast last year called Life Reflected. So we reflect on some stuff. I just talked about testosterone and glucose recently on that one. So like some cross-pollination topics. But yeah, we're doing a booty shoulder specialization cycle at Paragon.
Nice.
So if anyone's interested in working their booty and doing some delt work, that's the specialization focus for this next cycle that starts February 16th.
And they can still do your train with Brian too, right? You still do that?
Yeah, I still have Brian's program, but that one I'm not actually using the bro split on there right
Mhm.
now, even though that's like my program and it's supposed to be what I'm doing. I just didn't want to subject people to 6 day body part split.
Yeah, yeah,
So it's on a
yeah.
standard like 4 day upper lower.
I will say though, the short session is very
It's
intriguing
nice.
though, for
Yeah,
sure.
yeah.
Cool, man. All right, we'll obviously have you on again soon, and we'll get our next roundtable with Jordan going here again soon too.
Sounds
Talk
good.